Everyone, thank you for joining us. My name is Lalo Solorzano, and the guy with a cowboy hat everybody knows is Andy Shiles. We partner in a little podcast called Simply Trade, but so we're doing this session, Duty Calls. So we came up with this because there's a recurring theme among professionals. We're going to tell you, it's like preaching to the choir, so don't listen to me that you need to have trade compliance in your company, because you know that. But what we're doing is that we're trying to get everybody here on the panel to kind of to give us their thoughts and ideas on how they get that done. We have a big range of companies, some that have only 2 people in their staff, some that have 30, some that have in the middle, so et cetera. So we have a wide range. And again, so the name of the session again is Duty Calls. And let me introduce everyone to you. Bonnie Kirsch, way in the end over there. Hi, Bonnie. She's with Wayfair. And then we have Alex Green from RTI International. And then we have Natalia Matos from Eco Petrol, right? Awesome. And then we have Trang Than from Fortive Corp. And then we have Cindy Hazlitt, a.k.a. Hollywood. And she's from Belkin. And then finally, we have Shannon Horton from Ineos Composites. Awesome. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start, Andy, if you want to. And I'm going to be walking around. There's also a roaming mic somewhere else. So we're going to take questions from it. Oh, there you go. So we're going to take questions from the audience. But we're going to start with a panel, just give them some seed questions here and there, and then hope that it sparks conversations here. So,
all right, folks, is welcome, and especially to our virtual listeners that are attending the conference. Whoa, sorry, that's yours. Okay, I thought I did that. Well, anyway. So hello to the virtual side. I'm sure there's a way to type in comments and whatnot. Hope you're enjoying watching all of this. Also, for those that are here, please do something. Make sure that you meet and get the cards and not just exchange cards. Try and make a contact with at least 3 different people. Different industries, doesn't matter. Could be service providers, doesn't matter. But try and expand your network. And that's one of the things that expanding your network is going to help. As we go through and talk about this, one of the things I want to say is, and Bonnie, I want you to start off with this, is in looking at stepping into a compliance role that you're in charge of the department. And as you're looking at it and you're placed into it, and there's no doubt whenever you're interviewed for a job, most of the stuff is not really there. So they pull back the curtain after you're signed the offer letter, right? And you go, oh boy. And we'll just call it an oh boy moment. So when you hit that, does panic sit in? And if it does, how do you handle all of that when you're first coming into an area?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there are very few companies who are actually going to tell you what situation they're in at the interview process. So I think there are some definite first steps that you should take to kind of alleviate some of those concerns, or at least find out what they are right off the bat. For example, if your company is mostly importing into the US, you're going to want to go get on your ACE account right away, right? Start pulling some reports, see what's out there. If you're importing into Canada, go get a firm report, right? See what's going on. See what brokers are actually importing your goods for you. Do your classifications look even remotely right? Valuations, do they look all right? Do you have like random people signing free trade agreements or shippers letters of instruction, right? Try to just kind of do an overall audit, a high level audit to begin with of what really is going on here, and then just begin to tackle the issues one by one, right? Maybe you sort them out by highest risk level, right? Like, our classifications, we're like 20% accuracy. We should probably work on that first, right? Because the highest level of risk, and then just tackle it one problem at a time. So try not to bite off the whole thing at once, right? Like tiny little bites, and then in the end, you'll have a good solid program.
I have to remind myself, I just recently got a new position in any of this, whether it was compliance or whatever job you've got, you got to remind yourself, or I have to remind myself, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you can burn yourself out considerably like that. So how about the rest of you here? Is like, as you're going through, when you first took on, what was, let's say, the top 3 priorities when you assumed a role?
When I took the role was, my main thing was to figure out, okay, where are the records? Do we have records, export records, import records? Who's keeping those records? Are they accurate? Because obviously we all know that Customs and Border Protection and our other friendly federal agencies can come and audit you at any time. And Customs says 5 years of records, or we're going to give you a little souvenir that you're going to have to pay. And then we're going to audit you for a year and sit in your place. And then we're going to call the IRS and other agencies to come and audit you, because that's how the federal government works. But for me was records. Where are they? Who's handling them? How accurate they are? All your documentation in there when it comes from a transportation point of view. All your commercial invoices, packing lists, early bills, 9 yards. Also, your forwarders. Who are you dealing with? Who is dealing on your behalf when you import or export items? Are these forwarders vetted? At RTI, we vet everybody. And I mean everybody. Our forwarders, our clients, our suppliers, our contractors, our employees. Everything is vetted, everything is screened, because we want to make sure that who we're dealing with are authorized parties to receive either an export, or if it's coming into the U.S., an import. So documentation is key. Who you're working with is also key. And then what other partners you may have outside your control that can affect your operations. And I mean partners that the rest of the organization may be working with, that you go, hey, wait a minute, why are you working with that partner? They, have a partnership with a corporation in Iran, or a corporation in Syria, or a corporation in Venezuela that may be dealing with the government. What are we doing here? So kind of get that breadth of knowledge of who outside of your organization is dealing without your knowledge in any type of import and export operation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Bonnie and Alex touched on great points here, and it can be overwhelming, right? So I think, Bonnie, you touched on a great point, which was take a risk-based approach, because we can't do everything, right? Depending on our team size. So for me, what's important, or how, I measure what am I going to do first, is taking that risk-based approach or risk exposure, and then going from there and tackle one at a time. Depending on your team size, we can't be everywhere. We can't have eyes everywhere.
I'm going to jump in here on this. It's like, so with all due respect, it's easy. Well, take a risk-based approach. How in the Sam Hill are you going to risk on what?
Absolutely.
Legal operations. Is your company failing? Is failing to make money? I mean, what do you, so talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Andy, right? So like Bonnie mentioned, doing an audit, because I feel like with an audit, you can identify your gaps, right? And then at that point, identify your risk exposure. So I think an audit of your processes, your procedures, it's a big thing that you should do when you start managing a trade compliance team, whatever industry. I think that's a great start.
And you've got the petroleum industry, right?
Yes. So oil and gas, and publicly traded and government-owned, largest oil and gas company in Colombia. So it's fun.
There you go. All right. Let me ask this, is that as you're going through, let's say you identify some things, do you have in your situation, are you a one-person shop, or do you have a department that you're over, or whatever?
Yeah, no, we have a huge compliance team because, like I mentioned, we're government-owned and publicly traded. We deal with over 150 plus internal controls. So we have a big team. It's around 60 to 70 globally. In the U.S., there's 5 of us. So we have a big team, thankfully.
Herding cats there.
I need to sleep at night.
Right. How about you? What do you do?
So I'm with Fortive Corp. There's a large group of us here, you can tell. And on our team, I actually don't have any direct reports, but I do come from one of the operating companies out of operations. So now I'm in a compliance role. And I agree with everyone here. Looking at risk, looking at data is super important, auditing. But an approach you should take when you start actually is realizing that if you're a lean team, you're not an island. The business is your friend. Go make friends within the business, build those relationships, and help them help you.
You hit on something right there. Build relationships. That's one of the things that a lot of people have talked about, and it's like reaching out outside your own little area. Go reach out to the purchasing group or sourcing, reach out to logistics and all of that. And so that when you're in the midst of a crisis, it's not the first time you've seen them, right?
Exactly. And maybe don't start with, hey, I'm going to come audit you, right? When you start, or I'm from legal, I'm here to help. It doesn't go very well. Start out with coffee. Tell them that you just want to get to know them as a person. And when they make that connection, even if it's a personal connection and you haven't quite figured out where they fit into your compliance program yet, they'll think about you when they're working on something and they're like, hey, I met a compliance person, a trade person, and she talks about this as part of her job. Maybe I should flag this for her or him.
All right, along the relationship building type things, Cindy, this is one of those areas where you've got a lot of good experience and you've crossed different industries at times. How in the world do you get I guess, get the respect for your area and, build that relationship with outside organizations or outside your departments?
Well, when I went to work where I'm at now, they were already trying to get ISA ready. And so the compliance was being built. It was there. The record keeping was there. But I went after the money. I found some classifications where they were a new way of looking at things. And when you bring in millions of dollars to the company with PSAs and PSCs and protests, and it's almost $5 million, they're really happy with you. And so they listen to you in the future. And that really made a point with them, because when you bring in compliance dollars or duty back, a refund, as they said, you're not just bringing in $1, you're bringing in $20 because there's no sales involved. There's no product cost involved. There's no more fees involved to put out to get that money. It's just cash back into the coffer. And I was able to do that in the very beginning. It was a change in the industry, and I was on the front curve of it, challenging customs. And so they really respect our department's opinion to the point where Cindy knows what she's talking about. She tells you can't do something, legal backs me up and says we have to find another way. So it's really great.
Cindy, you're touching on something. That's one of the things, rather than fighting constantly, because of compliance, how many of us are overworked, understaffed, underappreciated until the proverbial, what hits the fan, and then they're going, why didn't they tell us? And so you're trying to clean up a mess. And as I always say, being the pooper scooper at the end of a parade, right? Building that relationship, though, of something where you went after something that obviously people in the executive level can understand, the bottom line. It's saving money and all that. So you put yourself in a whole different venue, which is great. How about you down here? Is that keeping, I guess, building that respect for your department and all of that, but how about earning the respect of your upper management? Do you keep them informed? Do you come alongside them? Do you fight them? What do you do? She'll turn it on.
Yes, I think those relationships are just as important as your teams and cross coworkers and things between the countries as well. I think without the leadership support, whether it be in your C-suite or below, is necessary to grow and to continue in trade compliance. We definitely don't fight with them. We are making sure that they're kept informed, especially when it is going to affect us. If there's a particular issue, right, that comes down, however it may be, that we want to make sure that they feel that they at least understand it and put it in terms that they can understand.
Okay, that last comment right there is where I was going. It's one thing to say you're going to keep them informed, but you just said putting it in terms that they understand. So how do you go about doing that?
Well, I think that's also time in our industry, right? To understand your audience and whether you're talking to someone that reports to you, whether it's someone that's equal to you just in another department, or you're actually referring to someone in your C-suite. They don't need to be in the weeds, right? They don't need all those details, they wouldn't necessarily understand them or be able to relate them to others themselves, whether they have to go further or not. So I carefully think about whoever that audience is. So if you, let's say someone in the C-suite, I'll use an example, and say to them, these are the ramifications, or this is the issue that's occurred, and give them, risk as well as, okay, this is the bottom line cost, or this is what will happen if we don't do X.
So tailor in your message if it's the CFO or, hello. I think I just went, there. Yes. Oh, there we go. I can hear. All right. Anyway, tailoring your message to the financial side, it's going to be cost. If it's the operation side, the cause and effect as to, operationally, it's going to be a good or a negative or something of that nature. Marketing, sales, brand, all that comes in play there. All right. Anybody have any questions? Because raise your hand if you do. I know that one of the questions while we're waiting, if anybody wants to ask something, how do you stay informed? And how do you get your department, how do you get them to stay informed? What do you look for? There's no way any of us can keep up with all the newsletters and the podcast or the news on television or radio or whatever, and how many emails, Lord have mercy, we all have to deal with. How do you handle that? Anybody?
So that's a tricky question, because when you are in compliance and logistics, not only you got to understand, okay, what new laws are being passed that is going to affect my operation, what geopolitical turmoil is going on in country A that's going to affect my import or export, what natural disaster or volcano is going to blow up in Iceland and reroute all my air traffic somewhere else. So to me, being a compliance officer or a compliance professional like all of you are, you're wearing a lot of hats. I mean, you're going to believe the hours I spend that time looking at the news, reading periodicals, getting updates from customs, trade letters from different organizations. And what I end up doing is every week I create an internal newsletter that goes out to the whole C leadership and VPs at my organization, because I want to let them know, hey, this is what's going on in this country. This is going to affect the way we operate. So when we come to you and go, you can't do this, you know why. Or when costs are being increased on air freight and we're paying $5 a kilo versus $2.50, you know why. Capacity is not there anymore because of these reasons. So I try to do that on a weekly basis to let them know what is going on in our world. So at that level, when a decision is coming through from a different department, they're not blindsided like, oh, let's have a committee meeting and discuss this. No, we need action. You know the reasons why we need to do this. So learning. And the day you stop learning, it's like I tell my team, the day I tell you I know everything is the day you got to call HR and have them fire me. Because obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about. So it's constant learning. And the more you learn, the more valuable you are to your organization.
Thank you. So we have a question here from the audience, Mr. Eric Hargrave. He's from Elliot Davis. Eric?
How are you all, two parts to this question. How are you all managing or approaching the UFLPA for forced labor prevention? And how are you selling that value to the C-suite? Because right now they look at it only as costly and not necessarily as a benefit or a return on that investment.
Thank you, Eric.
She'll turn it on.
Is it? Good. We'll make sure it's on. Or I'm actually having that exact conversation yesterday, literally the day before we came to this conference, and investing in our business, right, to understand what exactly we have to do. We started with, what can we do ourselves without investing more screening, a third-party company that is doing the mapping, right? Like, where can we start? So we start with I'm with Ineos, we're a chemical company. So what do we do with our raw material suppliers, right? As an example, what can we do as individuals, right? With the size of team that we have. So we start there, and it's about, again, information, right? Do we sit with them to say, all right, here are some examples about what's occurring in our industry. The folks that have, hold orders and the things that they've dealt with, and how far back does that go when someone is penalized? So we start there. And then when we've exhausted what we can ourselves, right, from a headcount perspective, time, where you can only do so much, there's only so much time, then we start looking into other resources, like some of the folks that are here and our sponsors today, others elsewhere as well. What can we do? And so then when we have at least the relationship has already been built, whether it's with our C-suite or our leadership teams, then we start those conversations as well to say, okay, this is the facts that we can offer you. This is what is available to us. And then it's, their decision to spend or not spend or accept whatever possibility or consequences or risk, as a business, right? Like I look at it, that's my job. I'm not going to tell you what to spend or what to do, but at least at a minimum, the consequences about what could happen if we don't actively participate.
As Adrian said today in the session, if you don't participate, it could hurt the company's reputation if they're caught in the news with forced labor issues. I'm very lucky. I work for an international company, and they take it very seriously, where actually other divisions were calling me about how we implemented our denied party screening. And I worked with other, not just divisions, other companies that the parent company owns to help them set up their denied party. So we're very lucky that we have that, but they're international and they see it globally. We even have more departments working on it, on different aspects of it. And it was more about my pulling in all the tools that are already there for us than having to implement it myself and to manage it from that respect. So if you have a global company, they should have touched it even in another continent and have to come to terms with it.
And then I think with conversations with your C-suite, I'm also fortunate to come from a company where integrity and compliance is, our CEO's focus, but it's also his name on the line. When you're talking to your C-suite, whose name is going to be in the headlines if your company is caught with importing things with forced labor or having a hold release order, right? It's not my name. I'm someone down in the operations. It's their personal reputation on the line as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think everyone here touched on great points. Another one, Eric, is software, right? I mean, supply chain traceability mapping, it's not even a full-time job. We need technology. So to the C-suite buy-in, absolutely educating them on the risk of not having the software, not buying and paying for this. Reputational damage, the names on the headlines, absolutely. But also software for us is a big one that we're looking at right now because we don't have the staff to do it. And supply chain traceability maps without a software, I'm not sure how anyone could do that.
Yeah, we also engage our procurement and purchasing team. We make them allies and go, hey, use the same software we are, screen these suppliers. Anything raises a flag, call me. And that's how we get engagement. So, our procurement team, our purchasing team, the logistics team, our HR team, we all use the same compliance software. So they all know that if something raises a flag, sees operations immediately reach out to me, and then I'll have that further research. I will do actually a second check with a different software tool to verify, is this the same organization? Because one misspelling of a letter, can actually throw a red flag with 100% match. Oh, no, it's only a 70. Okay, well, I like that trust and verify. I'm still going to verify that 70 just to make sure that they are clear, but engage them as your partners. And I'm, in my organization, I'm really thankful that we all work together and they all know that at the end of the day, the compliance team says yay or nay, but we all work together as partners using that software.
I would say the same things these guys said. Ditto is my answer, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, supply chain mapping is really important. We obviously are very much focused on it at Wayfair. We don't want to be one of those companies in the news, right? And we haven't been because we have a great handle on it, and we have since day one. So I think just getting in on the front lines and, already preparing for what's to come. For example, we all know that Canada is going to beef up their legislation related to this, right? They gave it a first pass. It's pretty weak. So it's going to get harsher. So we're already preparing for enacting the same forced labor that we, controls that we have in place in the US, preparing to have that ready for Canada, even before Canada says they're ready to enact that, right? So it's about like getting in front of it and see what's to come as opposed to being reactive, right? Try to be proactive. So I think that's the biggest thing I would add. But all of these answers were fantastic. So ditto.
If we got any more questions before I keep going?
More questions? Andy's liable to play
Y'all
his
can ask us
Spotify list
anything.
if we don't get a question.
Anything on your mind.
Yeah.
You have one behind you, Lola.
Oh, perfect. Okay, Amanda Harrell from Ultralife Corporation.
Not really a technical question, but as compliance professionals, besides the wonderful ICPA, what do you get in your email daily that you look at that helps you keep updated in your career field or your whatever PGAs or compliance you see on a daily basis?
Like, I kind of hate to point to somebody because I know there are providers here, but at the risk of getting in trouble, International Trade Today I find to be a wonderful publication. It is rather costly, but I find it worth it. I get that in my inbox every day, and it tells me all kinds of updates about, various things, whether it's new anti-dumping legislation coming, what Trump has said today about tariffs versus what he says tomorrow. It'll say like all kinds of whatever's in the news about de minimis or various court cases. I find it to be very helpful personally.
The funny thing, I find even just on the everyday news, there was something last week in Chicago about rampant theft on the rail. They're stopping for the interchange, and then the containers are all getting hit. And probably everybody in this room has been affected by that. So I bring it up, I show it to customs, but it's just watching the news. And there was even a TV show that worked it into their weekly series, the cop show, won't go into, that I was laughing about rail theft. And those kinds of stories helped amplify. And then we go to CTPAT, our CTPAT supply chain, to our security specialist, to tell him, go hit the railroads, to tell them to beef up their security and things like that. In other words, you find the news that you need to know in unusual places. Just keep your radar open, and you hear things that affect your job. It's amazing.
And this may be cheating, but everyone's been talking about AI. We all get a ton of newsletters in our emails, and I do use Copilot to give me the top 5 things from my emails that came in about sanctions this week. Give me the top 5 things that came in about imports this week, just so that I don't have information overload. Sometimes I do have time in the mornings to drink coffee and get through all of the newsletters, and sometimes I just need the tidbits to make sure that I didn't miss something. So using tools to help you navigate and find shortcuts to getting all the information you need, or at least get you started. If Copilot gives you one sentence and you're like, I want to hear more about that, then you can go in and actually dig through your emails and read the full article or the Federal Register notice.
And I think as well, if you're a global company with, a global footprint, it's going into the federal government websites of those different countries and registering. Like I'm sure here in the U.S., we're all registered with, so many, and doing the same thing in those other countries where your business has a footprint in as well. And then, like she said, I also use Copilot to help filter through those.
Yeah, that's one of the things too with the new development of AI technology, and it's Copilot is one that, from what I understand, I'm just now beginning to use it personally. But that's one of those things where we need to stop, back up a minute and go, you know what? I need some self-development. So in that realm, what do you do to try and keep yourself, I guess, stimulated in learning new skills or developing new knowledge that you become, how do you handle all that? Go ahead. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
ICPA is certainly a great resource, number one. I've put that tag out there. And there's a lot of other organizations and is that as well. And the relationships that we make here, right? The friends that you make, not just professional connections, but also to be able to ask questions as well as top of that. So outside of that, there's webinars, there's a lot of information online that you can also take outside of the conferences that we can participate in.
I was going to say ICPA because it's not just ICPA here and what you learn at the conferences, it's the connections you make. And I remember at my last job, when I first started there, again, it was about the money. They got a really great deal on some machinery, but they needed to send it overseas. And lo and behold, the company they bought it from was going to charge them all the money they had discounted to make them ready for Europe. And it was through ICPA that I talked to somebody else. I thought, there's got to be a way. Carl's no longer with us, but he was so knowledgeable that, he walked me through the process, and I went into my boss's office. And again, I was fairly new at that company, and I saved them $250,000 just because of a phone call I had from somebody I'd met at an ICPA conference. So the ICPA, just networking in the industry is amazing, and it can really help you.
So I'm a self-identified data nerd. I've really moved into the data piece of trade compliance, and there are so many resources online, but really for professionals out there, do what interests you. Like if it sparks a little bit of interest, dive deeper. And usually there's some certificate or some online program you can do that's available now, or reach out to the ICPA team and see who else in the industry can teach you or point you in the right direction or mentor you.
Excellent. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Alex, you were mentioning just keep learning, don't stop learning. And us in trade, we know that, the big ass sanctions, right? It's changing, always evolving and so fluid. So keep learning. There's so much resources out there and it's a bit overwhelming at times, but just be a forever learner. In order to be in trade, to be trade compliance professionals, we have to have that in us. So.
Okay, so as we're looking at this, many of you have started out at the very bottom or you're in a frontline role, that's fine. Preparing, if you could talk to your 21-year-old self, what skills, what education, what would you tell yourself to prepare you for where you're at today to make the journey easier?
I think for me, the number one thing I would tell myself is learn when to shut up. Many of you have known me for a long time, so I think you know where I'm coming from there, right? But it's but seriously, learn when to be quiet and listen, right? And I don't mean listen to respond. I mean actually listen and take in what the other person is saying, because you can learn so much that way, right? And you don't always need to prove that you're the smartest person in the room. The smartest people in the room don't need to prove that at all, right? Everyone's going to know it. So just, and also take your broker license exam as soon as possible. As soon as you're ready, because that is what's going to jumpstart your career. And if that means that you have to take it 6 times before you pass it, take it 6 times, right? Don't give up. Take it once, you don't do well, fine, study and take it again, right? Don't give up. That is hard to pass. And everyone in this room who will tell you who is a licensed customs broker, raise your hand if you're a licensed customs broker. Now put your hand down if you think the exam was easy. Yeah, so if you think the exam was hard, keep your hand up. All right, So look around. If you haven't taken the exam yet, it was not easy for anyone in this room. It takes grit. It takes a whole lot of studying. It's hard, right? So, just do it. Do it. That's my biggest advice. So shut up and take the broker's exam. That's my advice.
Bonnie, isn't the average pass rate? It used to be like 5%.
When I took it, it was 11.
It was 5 when I took it. So
yeah,
if
that's
you
crazy.
take it 20 times and
You'll
you
pass.
pass, you're within the average, okay? So you're going to pass before that 20th time. Just look at it that way and just she's right. Take it again if you didn't pass. You learn each time.
Yeah, I think that exam ranks at the same level as the foreign service exam, foreign service officers. So I've heard that from people in the industry that they're pretty close in the passing rate. So kudos if you got your license. What would I have told myself 30 years ago? Don't be afraid of asking questions. Because a lot of times, we're all human and we don't want to, I don't want to be that person raising my hand asking that question because they're going to think I'm dumb. Well, we've all been dumb once. And not asking that question because you're afraid can hinder your progress, can hinder your knowledge. Nobody was born learning everything. We all had to learn at some time and we're still learning. And the second thing that I would told myself is, the logistics and the compliance world is very small. People change companies. They're still on that same role. So don't burn a bridge with somebody, because you're going to encounter that person again at a different logistics group or a different compliance organization. So, make friends with people in the industry because they can be your best allies down the road. And once you burn the bridge, it's kind of hard to redevelop that relationship again. Because it is a small world, and you'll meet that person again, and you want to, hey, how you doing? Versus, man, they just closed that door in my face. I think I made them mad sometime. Yeah. So keep those relationships going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would have told myself that it's okay to not know everything, right? We get asked so many questions, and sometimes, actually many times, I'm like, hey, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to figure it out, right? And this networking, just in this room right here, there's like you mentioned, you gave a great example, and I've had that too, where it's like I go to a conference, I meet someone, and something comes up at work. I'm like, hey, I met someone at a conference. Let me reach out to them, whether it's LinkedIn or, got their business cards and figure it out together. So I think it's okay. I would have told myself, and I tell myself this every day, it's okay that I don't know everything, because also the regulations are changing all the time. So something that we knew yesterday, we may not know today, but we will figure it out. And I think in the trade community, like you mentioned, Alex, it's such a small world and a tight niche. And these conferences are great for networking and to have allies and people in the industry that can help. You're not alone.
What I say is it's not about knowing everything. It's about knowing where to get the information.
Exactly.
Even when you know it from the regs, you have to reread them if you're going over a part of the regs that you're, like with the foreign trade zone, we constantly reread what can we and can't we do. And we've been running the zone now for about 5 years. But yes, it's where to find the information. Then that means you're successful.
How many constantly look at charts and reread Incoterms? Oh my God, I've used them for years now. I keep going back to the chart. Okay, wait a minute. What's this one having? All that. So, yeah. All right, here's something I'd throw at you. How many of you have had a mentor in your career? A couple. See, that's, I will tell you, how about out in the audience? How many of you have had somebody mentor you? Actually, that's quite a few. That's more than I thought. How many of you, I don't know what, I'm in a blind spot here. How many of you have mentored somebody else? That's good. Let me challenge the group and the audience as well. When you go back, find somebody you can mentor. Seriously, that's somebody that's coming up through the ranks and all of that. But how about y'all? Is that as far as looking at that, how important was that mentor to you in your career?
Well, Andy, you have a fun story that you like to tell about me when we first met. Do you want to tell it or you want me to? So I was young, early 20s probably, and met Andy, and I was livid. I was pretty mad because FedEx would not stop clearing shipments on our behalf. And I had told them so many times, you do not have a power of attorney. We didn't sign an SLI. Like, would you quit? Now, granted, this was a long time ago, right? So I'm sure they're fantastic now. But at that time, I couldn't make them stop. Like, I would select the broker select option. I would tell them who I wanted to clear it, and they would just keep clearing it. And of course, they weren't doing it correctly at that time. I'm sure they're better now. So I was just like, how can it, like, do I need to issue a cease and desist? Like, what am I supposed to do? They wouldn't quit. So Andy walks by and he gave me some advice. He was like, well, this is what you need to do. And I was like, okay, so I need to get my purchasing people to do X, Y, Z. And like, we talked through it. And at the end of the day, I was like, all right. And then we figured it out together. So Andy has been a mentor for me, Lalo as well, several people in this room. I could name people for a long time. But that was one of our initial conversations where I started out pretty ticked off, and then we had a good conversation and came to a solution at the end. And it worked. It worked out. So, bring your problems to this event and talk to somebody and say, like, hey, this is the problem I'm seeing. Have you seen that problem, and what would you do? In fact, I encourage you to ask it now because we're on stage. So if you have a problem. But Andy, I don't know if you remember that story differently, but
I will say many have accosted me over FedEx issues in the day, and finally, we got it all straightened out. But it was usually came down to two things, and that's important to look at. I'll challenge people in their; they'll be madder than a wet hen. So it's like, okay, and we go through and we start talking about. Usually, when there's a problem, is a deficiency of information, a breakdown in communication, or a procedure or system type thing that goes wrong. And with that, it's just a matter of, again, mentoring, if you will, and I wasn't trying to put it on me, but I mean, in seriousness, I go through and look at it. When you have issues and problems, one of the best things you can do is work with people. And you've got to find out, is it a system problem, computer system, literally? Is it a procedural problem? Is it a training problem? Is it a performance problem? Okay. Or is it other? And I always throw other in there. But how often do you guys come across, or somebody comes into your area, but something's gone wrong, and you're wanting to write somebody up, but you don't have all the facts? So you got to find out if it's a computer system and the person's using it, you're writing up somebody, that's the wrong action for that. So in going through that, so I'll challenge somebody, well, think through what you're trying to do. So anybody else on their mentors, how important has it been to challenge what your thought process has been?
I think having a mentor within the trade compliance professional group is really great. It helps you learn and really build up your skills. But having a mentor outside of the trade group is also very important. They help challenge you in other ways to look at the problem from a sales perspective or an operations perspective, and asks you to look at things again through a different lens, through a different persona within the org, to make sure that what you're asking your organization to do is, reasonable and workable.
Well, when you're mentoring somebody, that's the other thing. You get to enjoy and celebrate their successes. And that's what's so fantastic. So I'm going to challenge the audience. I'm going to challenge y'all up here as well. Find somebody you can come alongside and mentor, whether it's a young kid just trying to learn how to read or do math or whatever, or trying to, work in the workplace. Anybody have any questions up to this point? We got one in the back.
All right. We have Christopher Lee from PAX. Chris, I'm sorry, let me get out of the way so that they can get you on camera here.
Hey, everyone. Thank you to Lalo and Andy for holding such a great talk. My question is about duty drawback. So, Cindy, it's something that you mentioned earlier. how you unlocked a new revenue stream for your team and your company. I was wondering, what kind of challenges did you face around duty drawback? How does it impact your org? And what was your experience like with the drawback process?
I hate drawback.
Me too.
I've done one at this company, but that's only because of a special situation. We have a foreign trade zone, so we don't do duty drawback. If we're exporting, it goes straight back out and we never pay duty. So that's how I got around duty drawback. But you're right. The problem for me, like when I worked at a toy company, consultants who didn't know anything but the word duty drawback is free money would say it to all the C-suite, and they'd come to me, what about duty drawback? We don't pay duty. There's no drawback. Toys were duty free. But it's if you find it's about the systems and being able to pull that information. It is very important. And I would say when you're doing those drawbacks, make sure you document how much you're saving and report that. If nothing else, on your annual review, that's the important part. When you do duty drawback, how much money you're getting back. They want to know.
I think we have a very complicated drawback situation because we're not the importer of record into the U.S., but we are the importer of record into Canada, and it's unused merchandise J1 drawback. So it's pretty complicated. So just I think, for us, it's been a matter of making sure to get the importers on board, right? And make sure that they're willing and able to share the information, and they're not going to want to share it with us, right? Because they don't want us to know the value that they imported at, because that may be significantly lower than the value they sold it to us at. And they don't want us, they don't want us to know their markup. Or they don't want us to skip over them altogether and go directly to their manufacturer for sourcing, right? And so for us, it was important to set up a provider and have a non-disclosure agreement in place between the importer, who is our supplier. So there's an NDA there, and then there's an NDA between us and the provider. So that keeps the supplier feeling better that their information is not going to be shared with us, and our information won't be shared with them either, right? So I think it's, and then how do you split the money, right? Because then you have the importer, who wasn't us, who paid the duty, but then we paid it to them in the form of the wholesale cost. They baked it into that, right? So we did pay the duty, just not to CPP. So it gets really complicated, but it's so they're going to want a portion of that drawback money. So then how much do you give them? Do you give them anything? Do you say, well, no, we're going to take all the money because we ultimately paid for it, but we're going to let you keep selling on our site, right? It's what do you do? So I think there can be a lot of challenges depending on the type of drawback you have, right? I've also done manufacturing drawback, which is a totally different thing. It's almost should have a different name. It's so different, right? So I think it all depends on your business scenario, but it's pretty interesting. I also hate it, but it is only because it's so complicated, but man, is it a lot of money. It can be a lot of money, right? So, yeah.
And I think the most important word for trade compliance, but duty drawback in particular, is record keeping, making sure that you have the records to back up your claims.
Thank you. There's another question.
I was just going to add.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add to that question as well. We didn't have a duty drawback program, and from coming here to ICPA and having conversations with peers as well as some of the companies that are sponsors, we have one in place today, and I've learned everything I needed to know from the people around here. So there's some really great opportunity to simply learn and to find out, do you even have a drawback program within your company to take part in?
Perfect. Okay, we do have one other question. We have several. Javier Arambula from Bayer.
I have also recently been crowned as the ICPA 2024 calf roping champion. So I do want to mention that. My question is more about, thank you. My question is more about mentorship, going back to that. What qualities would you look for in a mentor, and how could someone approach someone to be a mentor or a potential candidate for a mentor?
I have a funny attitude towards customs compliance. I absolutely love it. I would look for a partner that really loves learning and loves sharing that knowledge. It probably helped that my father was a teacher, that I grew up, he lectured too much, but he was always sharing his knowledge and somebody that's excited about the industry and how much there is to go in there, and they want you to win. That's what I would look for.
And someone who's kind. That's really big to me, right? Are they kind to everyone around them? Like not only, people at the top, but are they kind to the guy who comes and cleans your office, right? That to me is super important. Are they kind to the waiter at the restaurant? Like I don't want to be around people who aren't, That's really important to me. As far as how to ask them, just say, "Would you like to be my mentor?" I hate to simplify it, but I really do think it's as simple as that. I think there are tons of people in this room who would love the opportunity to mentor you. I just met you last night, and I would love to if you need one. So let me know. But there's lots and lots of people in here who would love to do that.
Thank you. So we have another question, Chris. It's from.
Hey, hang on just a second.
Okay,
We got one more comment.
One more comment. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
About mentoring, like she said, somebody who's sincere, somebody that, is going to speak the same way they speak to you as they speak at the C-level group, that they don't have that double speak. I'm going to say one thing to you, but once I'm talking to the senior leadership, I'm going to say something else. Somebody that's open, that's sincere, that what you see is what you get, that have integrity, that they're honest, down to earth. And I've met people like that who have been excellent mentors, and I've met people who have a very high reputation of being very knowledgeable, but as a person, I wouldn't trust my dog with them. Okay, so look for that kind of people.
Thank you. So we have Chris Scalise, right? Yep. And he's from Farrell.
Yeah. So hey, my name's Chris Scalise. Some of you have seen me before from working with Lila on the ICPA data groups, and mentoring is. You saw me kind of shaking and foaming and bouncing out of my seat. And the reason why is I have a great story I want to share with you guys. The data group met in New York City. Laura Hayburn was from Firmenich, was the data group leader. And Andrietta Girardo reached out to us and she said, I'm an adjunct at NYU. Would you be interested in having a couple graduate students come? Fantastic. Let's have them come. So we had representation in New York at the data group of probably about 25 different major corporations, all trade compliance people, and these two students. And their jaws were in awe. They were asking questions. They were interacting. They were networking. And the people were like, who are these guys? We've never seen somebody so passionate and enthusiastic about it. So just last week, the one student calls me from NYU, and he's working on his final project. And he's like, Chris, I want to show you something. And I said, yeah. He goes, I'm getting ready to graduate next year. He goes, I was always an IT guy. And he goes, I really like this trade compliance. I've been looking across. I've been looking in the tariff schedule. I've been talking to people from customs. I developed my own AI for creating quick tariff classifications. He started showing me this. And he's starting to rehance. And I looked at him, my jaw dropped. I'm like, how did you come up with this? He said, just from interacting from people at the data group. I'm like, I kind of felt bad. I'm like, well, I was in grad school. I wrote a paper. This guy created the state-of-the-art probably software, which is fantastic. But, to lead on to the mentorship, and one of the big things that we're driving with these data groups is to bring industry, service providers, government, and education together. And then what we do is through these different sources, everybody, in a sense, we're mentors to them. They're mentors to us. We're learning from them. They're learning from us. And we're growing it. So like I said, with 17 data groups and growing, if you're interested, I know it's a plug for the data groups. I'm sorry. But please look into it. And if you're really interested, reach out to Lila, reach out to me, reach out to Elizabeth, and get involved. Because this is where you make the connections. You learn from your peers. And I call us the Trade Nerd Tribe. I'll tell you, we're growing. So it's a lot of good things from there.
And Chris, even if there's not a data group near you, you can start one.
You can start one.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any more questions? We've got about 5 more minutes. Here we go. Charles Mooney. Oh, everybody knows Charles.
Okay, Charlie Mooney.
Oh, I've been told to say what DATA stands for. It's Designated Area Trade Association. Yes? Yeah. So it has nothing to do with data, however you want to pronounce it, right? It's nothing to do with that.
So I have a very unfair question. I'm going to ask it anyways. What does...
Charlie, I'd never expect anything other.
Okay. Consistency is important. What do you believe Trade Compliance 2030 looks like?
I think it's going to be My crystal ball says a lot of AI, a whole lot of AI. But frankly, customs needs to get on board, and they need to put something out that says that the use of AI can be a demonstration of reasonable care before any of us get too far deep in the weeds on this. Because I think right now I struggle with, is the use of AI going to hold up in court, right? In a court case. So I'm personally hesitant to put all of my eggs in AI basket right now. But if you're asking about 2030 or even 2035, I think it's a lot of AI. But that doesn't mean that we'll all be out of a job, right? Somebody has to develop the AI, and somebody has to tell people what you want out of the AI and what inputs you need to put into the AI. So become an expert, but also look into AI and don't be afraid to use it. I'm also the president of my HOA in my neighborhood, and I just wrote an entire, they're not going to watch this, so I'm going to tell y'all. I just wrote the entire neighborhood newsletter using AI, because who's going to know and who's going to care, right? So like, start using AI now for your own just little dumb stuff that you have to do. It's great. It saves you so much time, and it'll make you more comfortable with it, so that when Charlie's 2030 comes around, you're at least ready for it, right?
That's what I was going to say too about AI. No, it's fine, because we're developing something over in Europe, and it's no more an audit. By the time we get done with this report, it's a complete census. We're checking every entry, and we're taking it out of the audit category. So we didn't turn to AI for that. We created the reports, and then you still need us to interpret the exception report at the end of the day.
I think I see bigger sanctions, trade sanctions developing even further. We're all aware of what's going on around the world. You got China, you have Iran, you have the conflict in Ukraine, you have in Europe, you have countries that are closing borders, want to open borders. You have destabilization in some countries in Central America. So there is all this geopolitical machinery that's happening around us that affects international trade. And as administrations change, it doesn't matter who wins the presidency here in the U.S., I do foresee that Customs and Border Protection and other federal agencies are going to become more stringent on their audits. CBP just hired a bunch of people just to check export documentation. So I see an increase in enforcement from the U.S. government, and I also see an increase in sanctions worldwide, because, somehow countries, we just can't get along with each other, and that affects world trade and affects our jobs, and that affects who we can partner with and who we cannot. And at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to understand and learn that, to be able to make our organizations not only profitable but compliant with U.S. and international law.
All right, I'm going to ask a question here real quick of the audience, just out of curiosity. How many of you in the compliance arena basically stayed too long after work one day and you got tagged with it, and next thing you know, you got thrown into the compliance department? Got one over here. Usually there's a lot. So in other words, let me rephrase the question. How many of you, when you grew up, as you were growing up, let me rephrase it, you was like, I want to be in compliance? One or two, okay. All right, so all said and done, in all seriousness, this has been a great panel. I greatly appreciate every one of y'all's comments, and with everything here, again, find three people, make good connections. That these are three people that I want you to develop a relationship with. Shut up, listen, learn, ask questions. All of this has been a good group. So with that, I think anything else?
That's it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Folks, thank you so much for this. Oh, wait a minute.
Special thank you to our AV people. They are amazing.
Yes.
So please, because this was not going to happen without them. We're live streaming to LinkedIn and to YouTube in case y'all want to know. But anyway, so they did an amazing job. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.